I know it's hard to believe, and some of you may question what I'm about to tell you, but if you do have any questions about it, there's someone who usually comes to the Vaad. It's not here tonight, unfortunately, but you could come over to me afterwards and I'll tell you who it is, and you can corroborate what I'm about to tell you. My family and I were Zoche about 30 years ago to have Rav Shlomo Brevda Zatzal and his family living in our home for a month. Now, I know that's hard to believe, but it is true. And it was an incredible experience for me and my family. It's not really nogeya to our sugya tonight, but I thought it could be instructive, so I'm going to explain to you how that came about before I go into the topic for tonight. Approximately 30 years ago, I was sitting in my living room reading Pesach Krohn's new book, The Maggid Speaks. I think that was the first of the Maggid series. And in the introduction, Rabbi Krohn explains how did he come to write the Maggid series, which now is legendary. There's so many editions of it. And he explained that his father, Alav Shalom, heard that Rav Shua was coming to America, and he came to greet him when he arrived to invite him to stay at their home, even though they had never met before. And Rav Shua accepted, lived in the Krohn home for the time that he was in America, and in subsequent trips he always came back and stayed with the Krohns. As a result of this hospitality and achnasas orchim that the Krohns invited Rav Shua, the young Reb Pesach heard many, many stories around his table that Rav Shua told, and that was the basis of the first Maggid book, and the rest, of course, you know, is history. So I finished reading that introduction, and I said to my wife, what a tremendous chus the Krohns had to have Rav Shua living in their house. Wouldn't it be a wonderful thing if we could do a thing like that? Who could we invite? We started thinking, you know, Rabbi Brevda comes once or twice a year to America. We had a kesher with him, not a very deep kesher, but we knew him. Maybe we should invite him to stay with us. I said, wow, but that's ridiculous. He has family in New York. He stays with the family all the time. Why would he stay with us? You never know. At least we'll try. So we had his phone number. We called him. Couldn't get through. Tried the next day. Couldn't get through. Kept trying for a week to get through to Reb Brevda. Couldn't get through. At the end of the week, I saw signs up, Reb Brevda speaking in Borough Park. Oh, I realized when he comes to America, he always stops in London. He must have left when we called, and he was already either in London or on his way to London, spent a few days there, and then he came to America. So I came to the shir, and together with a large oilam that attended the shir, after the shir, went over to greet him. And I just happened to mention in passing, you know, was trying to get through to the Rav, but I realized last week the Rav probably wasn't even home. And that's why I couldn't get through. Then Reb Brevda turned to me and he says, well, why are you trying to get through to me? I said, well, it's not nogay anymore. He said, no, I'm curious. Why did you want to speak to me? He pressed me. So I said, well, obviously not nogay, but my wife and I wanted to invite the Rav. Maybe if he wanted to stay in our home, we would make a home available to him. He said, no, I'm staying with Mishpacha. I said, I realized that. And that's why, you know, obviously not nogay. And I felt a little funny about it, even mentioned it. It's silly, of course you're staying with family. A week later, I got a phone call from a Brevda. I was very shocked. He was calling me. What would he call me for? He said, Reb Meir, you invited me to stay in your home about a week ago. Is that invitation still open? I said, of course. But I thought the Rav was going back to Eretz Israel. He said, well, I was only planning to stay for a week, but our plans changed. I need to be still here in New York, and Mishpacha, where I'm staying, can't have me, and I really have no other place to stay. I said, well, it'd be a tremendous honor. So Reb Brevda came with his Rebbitzin, his youngest child. They moved into our home, and they stayed literally for a month. Now, as incredible as it sounds, but it meant every afternoon when I came upstairs from my office for lunch, there was Rabbi Brevda sitting there to join me for lunch. When we had supper together as a family, the table expanded and Rabbi Brevda and his family joined us. Of course, the Shabbos Suda was incredible to have Rabbi Brevda at our home for 4 weeks. The reason he had to stay was taken care of. After 4 weeks, he left, went back to Eretz Israel. But the kesher that we had was incredible as a result of that opportunity that we had to invite him. And the impact and influence that he had on me and my family is Ein L'Shayar, as he would say, Ein L'Shayar. And it was a tremendous opportunity for us, not just to establish a closer kesher, but to be mushba from a tremendous Bal Madrega, Gewaltige Talmid Chacham, Bal Midos Tovos, and the impact, I think, is still with us today. Just to give you a small example of that, shortly after Reb Brevda and his family were living with us, I had to make a very critical career decision. I was offered a full-time professorship at a major university. And it would have meant that I had to cut back on my private practice, but I would have been in academia, I would have been a professor. I wasn't really sure what to do. It seemed to be an opportunity, but it would take my career in somewhat of a different direction than it was going at the time. I was building up my practice at that time. So Rabbi Brevda was one of the Rebbeim that I consulted to ask him for his adracha. So he was in America at the time. I made an effort to see him, and I think I got to see him the day he was leaving back to Eretz Israel, but I managed still to see him. And I told him my dilemma, I wasn't sure what to do. So he looked at me and he said, "Why do you want to be a professor?" I said, "Well, it's certainly an honor to be a professor in a major university." He said, "Oh, yeah, I suppose so. I guess if Bilam were alive today, he'd also be a professor." I said, "Well, I was sort of taken aback by that comment." He said, "Well, what else would you be doing if you wouldn't be a professor?" I said, "Well, I would continue with my practice. It's building up, and I could still maintain a small practice if I was a professor, but not a full-time what I'm doing now." And he looked at me and he said something which chilled me to the bone. And he said, "Listen, you're going to be kind of your chelik in olam haba through your practice." When he said that, that was the end of the discussion, the end of my indecision, and it was clear that I didn't accept the position, and I continued in my practice, which I've done and since then. There's just one small example of a major issue that was a turning point, I think, in my life and in my career, and Reb Brevda Zatzal had a tremendous influence on me making the decision that I made. Now, a few years after he was in our home, Rabbi Brevda published a sefer. It's called Yemei Ratzon. I have it here. It's an inyanim of Chodesh Elul and Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. And now we're going to get into the sugya for tonight, our topic. He's talking about working on one's midos, trying to improve. And he says as follows, and I'm quoting from the Sefer Mandaf Lamed Ches. If you have this Sefer at home, if you don't, and you'd like to get it, you could contact Rabbi Brevda's son, and he gave me permission to give out his email address if anyone doesn't have the Sefer and it's not in the farm stores. It's rnadverb@yahoo.com. That's the letter R, the letter N, ADVERB @yahoo.com. This is what he writes in the Sefer. Nira sha'etza tova bioser, the best advice, Whoever desires to strengthen himself and improve himself the right way during Chodesh Elul in our times, and similarly any month during the year. Person shall fulfill the words of Chazal in Pirkei Avos, Knei lecha chaver. It's in Pirkei Avos, first parak, Knei lecha chaver. Now the Bartanura says on that Mishnah, why does it use the lashon Knei? Because when it comes to a Rav, it says Aseh lecha Rav. Because a Rav has to teach Torah. He's required to teach Torah. So you just pick whichever Rav you want. But no one's obligated to be your friend. So if you need a friend, it's so important that you should even pay money if necessary to have a chaver. Why is it so important? Why is a chaver so important that you have to be kinda a chaver and pay money, shell out money from your pocket to buy a chaver? So the Rabbeinu Yonah says on that Mishnah, there's 3 reasons why a chaver is so important. A chaver is important because it mechazik you in your limud Torah. You have a chavrusa. You learn together with him. It enhances your limud Torah. The second reason Rabbeinu Yonah mentioned is it's mechazik you in mitzvahs. You discuss halachas together, and the chaver helps you be mekayim mitzvahs. And the third reason the chaver is so important is because he can give you eitzes, advice, and things that maybe you don't know. He can help you out and give you advice. Knei lecha chaver. Now I'm continuing in Brevda Sefer. Which means that a person should seek out to find a good friend who's a Yirei Hashem, someone has Yirei Shemayim. Savlan, he's patient. Ubal Chesed, person who likes to do Chesed. Modeh ala emes, he's an honest person. Bal Ayin Tova, he's generous. V'ohev esabrius, and he likes people. V'maskim bo b'deyosov, and the two of them get along. They see eye to eye, as we would say in English today. V'yachlitu, and the two of them together should decide lipogesh, to meet. Kama pamim b'shavua, a few times a week. B'ofen kavua, in a fixed way, with a kvius. Le'erech chotzi shah, for approximately a half an hour. And what should they do for that half an hour? A few times a week, the two friends. Ba yizbonenu, in that half an hour, they should be misboinen, they should look into v'yaskimu, and agree, be'eza inyan ba'avodasam, in some matter in their service to Hashem. B'torah, b'mitzvahs, b'tikkun amidos, whether it's learning Torah, or doing mitzvahs, or fixing their character traits, b'tfilah, or with davening, v'chulu, etc. Rotzen l'schazik, some aspect of their avodah that they want to improve. V'yikablu al atzmam, and they should accept upon themselves. B'li neder, of course. La'avod al eza prat mea inyanahu, to work on some detail of that thing that they're addressing, that they're working on. Dover kal below kovid, something simple, not hard. V'yisyatzu im godol b'torah v'yirushamayim, and they should together consult with an adam gadol, a talmid chacham, shomer sod, who's going to keep their secret and not talk about this. B'chol pekisha kvua, and in every meeting that is fixed meeting, yimseru ish l'rayehu din v'cheshben al midas hatzlachosam binyanahu. They should give an accounting to each other on how successful they were on working on that particular detail in B'ezras Hashem. V'yitnu eitzos ish l'rayehu, and they should give each other advice on how to improve in that area. Now, in some respects, I've tried to model our Vaad after some of the H's that Rabbi Brevda gave in this shtickle, in his Sefer. Shortly after the Sefer came out, a younger man came over to Rabbi Brevda and told him that he got a copy of the Sefer, was learning it. He came to that section. He was makabel b'li neder, got together with a chaver who met the criteria that Rabbi Brevda outlined. They decided to meet to work on some aspect of avoda. They had their first meeting, and they were thinking, what should they work on? What should they focus on? Which aspect, which prat should they deal with? They couldn't decide. They noticed in the Sefer, it says that they should Yisyatzvu im Gadol b'Torah b'Yerushalayim. They should consult with a Gadol. So they thought to themselves, who should they consult with? They'll consult with Reb Brevda and ask him for an eitzah. What should we work on? What should we focus on? So one of the pair met with Reb Brevda and posed this question to him. Reb Brevda's first reaction was he kissed the younger man on the forehead. He was so touched. Someone not only bought the Sefer, not only learned the Sefer, but took it seriously. Actually wanted to implement the plan that Rabbi Brevda had outlined in the Sefer. He was very taken aback. Then the younger man said, but what should we focus on? Some area of midos, what should we work on? So this was the eitzah that our Brevda gave this younger man. He said, when you're talking to your wife at home, make an effort not to speak to her from the next room. And if you're in the same room, to make sure that you're always looking at her when you speak to her. Never speak to your wife if you're looking at something else or if you're in another room. So the younger man was very taken aback. It's not an easy thing to do. Kids are running here, kids are running there, you have to do this, you're running out, you're busy, you're doing errands, you're calling over your shoulder, she's calling over her shoulder. That's not a normal thing. Never to speak from another room. Never to speak unless you're facing each other. So Brevda said, listen, there's another mission in Pirkei Avos, in the same parak. Parak Aleph, Mishnah Tes Vav, says, Avei Mekabel is kol adam b'seiv b'panam yafos. How do you understand that? Does that mean only when you meet someone, when you're walking down the street, you have to greet them and smile and say hello? What does it mean, Mekabel kol adam? It means if you're talking to somebody, that's Kabbalah's panim. You're talking to somebody. It should be b'seiv b'panam yafos. Panim is the face. Yafos means with a smile, a nice expression. And what does seva mean? When we make Kiddush, we say, Savri Maranan. What does Savri Maranan mean? It means pay attention. Seva Panam Yafos means that you pay attention to the person you're speaking to. You're not paying attention if you're looking into a newspaper. If you're busy doing something and you're talking over your shoulder, that doesn't show proper respect and derech eretz to your spouse. Now, what about your spouse doing it to you? You don't have to give any instructions. If you're going to speak to your wife that way, then she'll get the message and she'll start to speak to you that way as well. But even if she doesn't, it's an important message for yourself that you have to respect your spouse, you have to respect your wife, and this is a sign of respect. And other signs of respect will flow from this, but this will keep you on track. Well, the younger man made an effort to work on that with his chaver. And I'm sharing it with you this evening because I think it's a tremendous goal for all of us to reach. Now, I'm sure some of you are wondering, how do I know the details of what Rabbi Brevda said to him, what he said to Rabbi Brevda? Did Rabbi Brevda repeat the conversation to me? How did I know this? Well, as you may have guessed by now, I was the younger man. And I know what you're also wondering. Do I never speak to my wife over my shoulder? I never run out to mincha. I'm going to mincha. I never say that. I walk through the house to speak to face and say I'm going to mincha, and then I go. That's how Rabbi Brevda Zatzal spoke to his Rebbetzin, by the way. He never called over his shoulder he's going to mincha. He walked into the kitchen wherever she was, and he said he's going to mincha. He faced her whenever he spoke to her. Do I always do that? I won't keep you in suspense. The answer is no. So why am I mentioning it to you? So, the story is told that when the Chafetz Chaim came out with the Sefer on Shmiras HaLashon, he was selling the Sfarim himself. And there was one businessman that came to his house, passing through Vaad, and he stopped by the Chafetz Chaim. He wanted to buy some of his Sfarim. So he bought a whole bunch of the Chafetz Chaim's Sfarim, and the Chafetz Chaim offered him Shmiras HaLashon. The businessman said, no, that Sefer I can't buy. The Chafetz Chaim said, why not? He said, look, Rebbe, I'm a businessman. I deal with people all the time. I come into contact constantly with people. There's no way I could keep all the halachas of Shmiras HaLashon. I can't buy the Sefer. So the Chafetz Chaim said to him, you know, Rabbi Yisrael Salanta considered your issue. And when I showed him the Sefer, Rabbi Yisrael Salanta said to me, you know, even if somebody will only learn your Sefer on Shmiras HaLashon, and after he learns it, he'll put it down and give a krechts, it's Kedai who wrote the Sefer. So the Chafetz Chaim encouraged him to buy the Sefer Shmiras HaLashon, even if he didn't feel he could keep all the halachas. Even a krechts is worth it after you learn the Sefer. So I'm saying the same thing to you. I don't expect that you're always going to be able to speak to your spouse, panim el panim, face to face. But when you don't, maybe you'll give a krechts. And even if you don't give a krechts, you'll think to yourself, maybe this isn't the right thing. Maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Maybe I should take a few steps back in. I should turn around. I should face my wife and speak to her directly. That's the proper kavod, and that's the proper derech eretz. And it's not only important for her, it's important for me to know that I have to maintain that level of respect to my spouse, to be mechabed my wife that way. And it's also important for my children to see that this is the way the parents speak to each other. I've spoken before how important it is for children to know that their parents get along with each other. Not only get along with each other, but respect each other. So I don't expect that this is something we'll be able to do 24/7, but at least if we have it in mind as an ideal, as an eitzah that Rabbi Brevda Zatzal gave for Shalom Bayis, that it can certainly enhance our relationship with our spouses and help us to work on our midos. And hopefully someday we'll get to the point where maybe we will always be able to speak to our spouse, panim el panim, and be mekayim seva, be mekabel kol adam b'sefer panim yafos, and begin with our spouse at home. Now I just want to mention that the next Vaad, B'ezras Hashem, will take place in 4 weeks from tonight. That's January 1st. B'ezras Hashem, that's the night after Motzei Chanukah. And we'll have to be meeting at the new time of 10:30 because of the schedule conflict here. B'ezras Hashem will continue at that time. I also want to mention that Baruch Hashem, we've been zocheh that the Vaad is now on the platform of the Torah Anytime, and we're very honored that we're included in such a chashuv platform. It's a whitelisted site, and it's a tremendous opportunity for people to, if you have a few minutes, extra minutes to learn. There's such an enormous array of terrific shiurim, and it's again an honor that we're now on that platform as well. I wish you a good chodesh and a freilich Chanukah.